At the family photo shoot, my 6-year-old daughter sat in the front row smiling. We got the Christmas cards back, and she'd been photoshopped out of every single one. She burst into tears when she saw it, asking what she'd done wrong. I didn't yell, "I did this." The next morning, my mom opened her gift and went pale. The stack of Christmas cards lay on the dining table, glossy and perfect. My mom was beaming like she'd just curated a museum exhibit. "Look at these," she said, holding one up so the light caught the shimmer. My 6-year-old daughter, Julia, darted forward. She loved photos, loved anything that made her feel part of the family. Her little fingers grabbed a card before I could stop her. Her smile didn't last. She tilted her head, squinting, scanning the rows of cousins and grandparents. Jesse and Ryan, my sister Becky's kids, grinned right at the front, polished shoes, hair gelled stiff. Becky stood behind them with her husband, Jason, both of them looking like they were posing for a magazine cover. Even my mom and dad had made the cut, stiff smiles and all. But Julia? Gone. Not cropped out. Not hidden behind someone taller. Gone. "Where am I?" Julia asked, her voice small. I leaned closer. My chest tightened. She had been right there that day. Front row, pale yellow dress with little daisies on it, her hand tucked into Jesse's for courage. "Maybe it's just this one," I muttered, reaching for another card. Julia grabbed one too, then another, and another. Her breathing quickened. "But I was there!" I sat in the front row. I remember I flipped card after card, hoping, praying one had slipped through, but every single one was the same. Julia erased, like she had never been part of the family at all. For half a second, denial clung to me. Maybe the printer messed up. Maybe it was a glitch. Then I saw it. The floorboards behind Jesse, copied and pasted where Julia's shoes had been. A shadow smudged, duplicated, stretched unnaturally across the front row. The curve of Jesse's hand cut strangely, like it had once been resting on someone who wasn't there anymore. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had paid to have her removed. That takes effort, time, money. And apparently, they put a lot of effort into erasing her. She flipped faster now, her little hands trembling. "Maybe I'm hiding," she whispered. "Maybe I'm too small. Maybe I'm behind someone," her voice cracked. She dropped the cards onto the table. Her wide eyes filled, and then came the question that broke me. "Why am I not in any?" I pulled her against me, felt her shoulders shaking. She's 6 years old. She shouldn't even know what it feels like to be erased. But she does now. I wanted to scream, rip those perfect glossy lies in half, shove them back in Becky's face. Instead, I kept my voice even, my jaw tight enough to ache, because silence, right then, was louder. Across the room, my mom adjusted a card on the mantel like nothing was wrong. "The colors look so clean this year," she said, smug. My phone buzzed. A message in the family group chat. "Becky. Finally looks uniform. Uniform." Like my daughter was a stain they'd scrubbed out. Julia wiped her face with her sleeve, still scanning the room. Her little voice was shaking. "But I was there." "Why am I not there now?" Nobody answered. My dad cleared his throat, muttered, "We just wanted it tidy." My mom sighed, as if she were explaining something obvious. "We all talked about it. Me, Dad, and Becky. We agreed it was better this way. Her dress didn't fit, she stood out, and it ruined the picture. It's not personal." Julia's lips trembled. Her cheeks blotched red. But I was smiling. The silence after that was suffocating. I held her tighter, my fury a cold, sharp thing under my skin. I didn't yell. I didn't give them the performance they were waiting for, but inside I made a promise. This would be the last time they erased my daughter. The cards gleamed under the light, each one a polished lie. And I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The next morning, my mom opened her gift and went pale. Becky was always the investment. I was always the labor. It started small. She got piano lessons. I got a mop. She had soccer practice 3 nights a week. I scrubbed the kitchen floor. By the time we hit high school, the pattern wasn't even hidden anymore. When Grandma's knees started giving her trouble, it was me they called. Megan, help her upstairs. Megan, make sure she eats Becky's excuse. Her schedule is too full. Of course it was. Becky's schedule was sacred. Mine was just available. I asked once if I could join a drama club at school. My dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Becky already has 3 activities. Do you want to drain us dry? My mom smirked. You learn plenty of lessons cleaning the house. Yep, nothing screams well-rounded childhood like perfecting the art of scrubbing mildew. That was childhood. Becky polished, me invisible. When Becky married Jason, the investment finally paid dividends. My parents beamed like they'd raised royalty. They gifted Becky and Jason a hefty down payment for their first house. Then they covered new furniture. Then, when Becky wanted new counters, they chipped in for renovations too. I watched it all happen from the sidelines. Silent. Bitter. A little amused, honestly. They acted like Becky had won an Olympic medal just for saying I do. So when I fell in love in my 20s, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd treat me like more than a housemaid with a pulse. Spoiler, they didn't. His name doesn't matter. Let's just call him the disappearing act. We dated a couple of years. We weren't married, but we were talking about moving in together. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, carefully, cautiously, asking my parents for help. Not a deposit. Not a house. Just a little with rent. Becky got a house. I asked for an apartment. You don't need it, my mom said flatly. Stay here. There's space. Right. What she meant was, stay here. Keep cooking. Keep cleaning. Keep helping Grandma. Stay useful. I swallowed the bitterness and smiled. Sure. Then I moved out anyway. It was a shoebox of a flat, barely big enough for the 2 of us. The rent ate half our paychecks. The furniture was secondhand, creaky, lopsided. But freedom doesn't need matching curtains. I still came back, of course. Old habits die hard. I helped Grandma with meals, kept her company, made sure she was okay. I cared about her in a way my parents didn't. And during that time, I got pregnant. The timing wasn't perfect. We were juggling jobs, bills, and his late-night study sessions. But I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally see me. See us. They didn't. I hinted. I asked softly. I flat out said it one night. Could you help us with rent? Just for a while? It's hard. My dad shook his head, already annoyed. We don't have money for that. A week later, Becky got new furniture. Paid for by my parents. The disappearing act lasted a year and a half after Julia was born. Then he announced he'd been accepted into a master's program out of state. He promised we'd stay in touch. 2 months later, he had a new girlfriend. Julia was still 1 at the time. I was alone. And I couldn't keep the flat on my salary, so I packed our lives into boxes and moved back home. I thought maybe I'd at least have the comfort of my childhood bedroom. I was wrong. The room had been renovated. Fresh paint. New curtains, toys stacked neatly in the corner. Ryan's name in glitter letters above the bed. My nephew's room. Ryan didn't even live there. He just visited sometimes. My old room had been transformed into a shrine for Becky's son. Becky's childhood room? Still there. Untouched, like a time capsule. And me? Julia and I were shoved into the attic. Shabby walls, A sloped ceiling that scraped my knuckles every time I changed the sheets. Drafts in winter, sweltering in summer. Barely enough room for 2 beds jammed side by side. "It's fine," Mom said when I protested. "Ryan needs his own space when he visits." "You'll be fine up there." So I carried the boxes upstairs. Every creak of that attic floor was a reminder. I didn't belong. Julia was too young to notice at first. But kids grow fast. By 6, she noticed everything. Jesse and Ryan had their own bedrooms, 2 each, really, one at home and one here. Julia had none. She asked me once, quietly, "Why do I share with you? Why don't I have my own?" I smoothed her hair and told her it was temporary. I lied, because the truth was, I couldn't save fast enough to get us out. Nearly every paycheck went straight into the household. Food, bills, contributions I was expected to make. I tried to save, but it was never enough. And every time Julia asked why she didn't have what her cousins did, it cut deeper. It's funny. People think cruelty has to be loud. Screaming, shouting, showing, breaking things. But sometimes cruelty is silent. It's a quiet decision to fund one child's house and deny the other rent money. It's a glitter name above a door where your daughter's crib should be. It's the word fine tossed at you when you're shoved into an attic. That silence? It's louder than yelling. And I could feel it building. Because what started with me was now aimed at Julia. And I wasn't going to let them erase her the way they erased me. I didn't know how yet, but I knew something had to break. I couldn't sleep that night. Julia finally dozed off beside me in our attic room, clutching her stuffed bunny like it was the only anchor she had left. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling where water stains formed shapes in the dark. Every creak of the old beams felt like the house itself reminding me where I stood, underneath everyone else. I pulled out my phone and opened a chat with a friend who worked at a bar downtown. She'd told me before they were always short on hands, and I knew if I took it, it could be my ticket out. No sleep, no rest, but freedom never comes cheap. My thumbs moved before I could stop them. "Do you still need night staff?" "I'll take the shifts." "Send." It was reckless. I already worked days while Julia was in school, and nights were supposed to be for rest. But I couldn't rest in that attic. Not after watching my daughter cry over those damn Christmas cards. If I had to run myself into the ground to protect her, so be it. I was done waiting for scraps from people who never planned to feed me. I crept down the hall to Grandma's room. Her lamp was still on, a soft glow spilling under the door. I knocked lightly and went in. She was propped against her pillows, glasses perched low on her nose, flipping through a crossword. Sharp as ever. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, without looking up. I laughed softly. "You know me too well." I sat on the edge of her bed, pulled one of the glossy cards from my pocket, and handed it to her. She studied it for a moment, her brows knitting. Then she saw it. Or rather, she saw the absence. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. Julia was there. "Yes," I said flatly. "Front row, yellow dress. But apparently yellow doesn't match the uniform they wanted." She set the card on the blanket with a sigh. I told her my plan then. The night shifts, the bartending job, the hours that would carve into whatever was left of me. "I can't keep her here," I said. My voice broke on the last word. "Not when they treat her like this. I'll work nights. Save. We'll move out." Grandma looked at me for a long time, her eyes sharp in the lamplight. Finally, she said, "You won't need to do that." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She shook her head, turning back to her crossword. "Just leave it with me." Cryptic, like one of her puzzles. I didn't press. I kissed her cheek and went back upstairs, still thinking about the bar job. Morning came too soon. I dragged myself downstairs, half expecting another fight, another lecture. Instead, I noticed something strange on the living room table. A box. Small, neatly wrapped, sitting among the leftover decorations like it belonged. I hadn't seen it there the night before. Mom spotted it before I could speak. "Oh, how sweet." "A gift from Grandma." She smirked, peeling the ribbon like she was unwrapping a prize. I stood frozen, Julia peeking from behind my leg. Mom lifted the lid. Her smile collapsed. She pulled out a stack of papers, skimmed them, then froze. The color drained from her face. "What is this?" she hissed. Then louder, to the whole room. "What the hell is this?" Is this some kind of joke? My dad stepped closer, trying to read over her shoulder. His mouth fell open. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. I caught a glimpse of the header on the top sheet. Legal formatting. Official seals. Not a joke. Before I could speak, the hallway creaked. Grandma entered, slow but steady, the lawyer I'd seen once or twice before at her side. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "It's not a joke," she said calmly. "That is an eviction notice. And I've already changed my will. Megan and Julia will have this house. You'll get nothing." Silence detonated in the room. Mom sputtered. Dad stared at the papers like they might combust. Julia gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. I couldn't move. Then the shouting started. Mom's voice cracked, high-pitched and wild. "You can't do this! You're not in your right mind!" Dad tried a different angle, smoother, pleading. "Think about what you're saying." Think about the family. Grandma didn't flinch. "I am thinking about the family. I'm thinking about the child you tried to erase." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Everything was drafted correctly. Witnessed, signed. It stands." I swear I saw Dad's knees buckle. And me? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After all these years of being invisible, erased, shoved into attics and silenced. It wasn't me who finally screamed loud enough to be heard. It was Grandma. And she'd chosen me. I met Julia's eyes. She was still clutching my hand, her face pale. But for the first time in days, I saw something in her expression besides confusion. Hope. The chaos swelled again. Mom pacing, Dad muttering, both of them throwing accusations like confetti. "Megan manipulated you. She poisoned you against us. This is elder abuse." Grandma's laugh cut through it all, sharp and bitter. "The only abuse here is what you've done to her and that child." My mom's mouth snapped shut. My dad sat down heavily, as if the air had gone out of him. Julia leaned into me, whispering, "What's happening?" I kissed her hair. "Something good," I murmured. "Something finally good." I didn't know what came next. Would they fight it in court? Spread more lies? Try to claw their way back into control? Probably. But right then, in that moment, the tide had turned. The house went quiet after Grandma's bombshell. Too quiet. No shouting matches, no slamming doors. Just the heavy, suffocating silence of people plotting. My parents barely looked at me. Dad busied himself in the garden, hacking at shrubs that didn't need cutting. Mom clattered dishes louder than usual, the noise sharp and deliberate. Her version of shouting without words. Julia noticed. "Is it over now?" she asked me one night in our attic room, her voice small in the dark. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie. Instead, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Not yet." Because I knew better. That silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of a storm building. It arrived 3 mornings later. A knock at the door. Sharp. Official. My chest tightened. Julia's hand slipped into mine instinctively. Mom beat me to the door, her tone instantly syrupy. "Oh, officers, thank you for coming." And there they were. 2 police officers and a woman with a clipboard. A PS, Adult Protective Services. My stomach dropped. The taller officer cleared his throat. We've had a report of possible elder abuse in this household. We'll need to speak to everyone separately. Elder abuse. Of course, I didn't need a crystal ball to know who made that call. They separated us, Grandma to her room. Julia led gently to the kitchen, though she looked back at me, wide-eyed and scared. I sat stiff on the couch while Mom hovered in the hallway, whispering words like confused and safety, and we're worried. My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to smear me. They were trying to put me in handcuffs. If they arrest me, I thought, what happens to Julia? Who takes her? Not them. Please, not them. I swallowed hard and tried to keep my voice even as the questions began. Do you prepare meals for your grandmother? Yes, I said carefully. I always have. Were you alone with her before she signed those documents? Yes, but not during. Who was the man in her room that morning? Her lawyer. The one she called. The questions weren't unfair, but the way the officers' pens scratched across their notepads, the way they traded looks, it felt like guilt was already written on my forehead. From down the hall, I caught fragments of Grandma's voice through her door. Clear. Steady. By the time the officers came back out, their expressions had shifted. Suspicion gone, replaced by something harder. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at my parents. And then Grandma insisted on coming out herself. She leaned on her cane, but her voice was iron. No one forced me. I asked my lawyer here myself. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I changed my will because it's my right to do so. Silence. Then she turned her gaze on my parents. The only abuse in this house is the way you treat Megan and that child. If words could slap, that one landed hard. The APS worker closed her folder with a snap. I don't see any concerns here. Everything appears in order. The officers nodded, polite but firm. Thank you for your time. We're satisfied there's nothing further for us to pursue. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. I pulled Julia into my arms the second she was back by my side. She buried her face in my shoulder, trembling. But the relief didn't last long, because Grandma wasn't finished. She turned on my parents, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. To call the police on your own daughter, to lie about me, to put my great-grandchild through this? She shook her head, fury radiating off her. You don't belong under my roof. Mom gasped, clutching the back of a chair like she might faint. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. You'll move out, Grandma said flatly. I don't care how. But you will. It wasn't a suggestion. I'd never seen my parents speechless before. Later, when the officers left and the front door clicked shut, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was jagged, dangerous. My parents sat rigid at the table, their faces pale, their eyes darting between me and Grandma like they couldn't decide who to hate more. Julia pressed closer to me. Are we okay now? She whispered. I kissed her hair. Yes, I said. My voice was steady. For the first time, I believed it. Of course, I didn't know exactly what would happen next. Would they fight? Contest the will? Spread more lies? Probably. But the tide had turned. Their attempt to erase me had failed. Their attempt to erase Julia had backfired. And now? Now they were the ones being erased. A week later, the silence broke. Not with yelling, not with slammed doors, but with threats. My parents circled me in the kitchen like vultures, hissing promises. You'll regret this. We'll make sure they take Julia away from you. You think you're safe? You're not. I didn't flinch, but Julia heard. She sat on the stairs, clutching her stuffed bunny, her eyes wide. That was the last straw. Grandma called her lawyer the next morning. By noon, 2 officers were standing in the doorway while my parents stuffed clothes into suitcases. It wasn't dramatic, No screaming, no dragging, just the sound of zippers and the snap of a folder as the officer handed them a no-contact order. "You'll have to find somewhere else," Grandma said coldly. "And you'll leave Megan and Julia alone." They left under police supervision. That night, Julia slept through without waking once. Her first full night's sleep in weeks. Fast forward 6 months. Word travels in families, especially ours. A cousin called me, half whispering like she was passing on state secrets. They asked Becky for help. I nearly dropped the phone. Of course they did. Becky, the golden child. The one they'd poured every penny into. "And?" I asked. "And she said it's not a good time." Money's tight. Money's tight. After everything they gave her, house deposit, renovations, furniture, now, when they had nothing, she suddenly couldn't spare a dime. I shouldn't have laughed. But I did. By the end of the month, the whispers grew louder. My parents were seen at a shelter. Later, someone mentioned a dingy rental in the rough part of town. The irony? After losing everything, they didn't fit into Becky's perfect picture either. Meanwhile, Julia and I live downstairs with Grandma. She has her own small room now, painted soft yellow. Every night she decorates the walls with new drawings. In the mornings, I watch Grandma beam at Julia over breakfast, smiling at her like she's the only child in the world that matters. We are not rich, we are not glamorous, but for the first time, we are safe. We are a family. So what do you think? Did my grandmother do the right thing? Or did she go too far, disinheriting her own daughter? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more.